Magic Required, a Lochlan Ellyll novel, written by H.S. Paisley, narrated by Patrick Zeller and Addison Barnes. To my Aunt Ruth for the generosity that changed my life, my grandmother for her endless love and support, and to my father for helping me make the nightmares funny. Chapter 1. They decided water would be the way I died, but I swam anyway. It was my way of biting my thumb at them, at the old gods who made me like this. To be honest, I hated the water. It scared me. I doubtless hated the fear more than the water itself, because I needed it to. It kept me centered. I didn't used to swim. I didn't used to need to risk my life to clear my head. There was a time when singing did that for me. It still did, sometimes, but not like I used to. Not like before my eldest brother died. My eyes flicked up to the clock on the wall. 5:37 a.m. 20 minutes. The community center pool wasn't huge, but it was long enough for me to pick up some speed. With any luck, I'd have a lane to myself until just after 6. Standing at the edge, I looked down at the rippling water, and the only other person I ever saw swimming this early. Tim. Though he was likely in his early 70s, I could tell he'd been one hell of an athlete in his prime. I suspected a boxer. Or mayhap he reminded me of Muhammad Ali with darker skin. He was here every day, without fail, right at 5:30. And he had the slowest front crawl I had ever seen. Looking away from Tim, I positioned my goggles, filled my lungs, and dove. Cool liquid engulfed my body, and I felt the familiar jump of my heart. That happened every time I was in the water. Blind panic rose up within me, but this particular brand of panic was familiar. With a practiced progression of thought and movement, I controlled it easily. Tim and I were soon joined by the 6 a.m.ers. Sharing the lane slowed my pace, and I had no patience to swim slowly. Not today. I got out of the pool. To say I was a little old for nightmares was a cosmic understatement, I thought, as I stepped under the lukewarm water of the community center showers. Then again, the longer you live, the more you saw, so perhaps not. I turned to let the water run over my face. When I closed my eyes, the young girl's lost and tear-stained expression was all I saw. I squeezed my eyes shut tighter, attempting to remember every detail of my nightmare. I didn't want to remember, but it felt important. Her crying seemed to flood my ears. She couldn't have been older than 5. Why was she alone? The images of her wandering down an abandoned street flashed on the backs of my closed eyelids. I saw her pass a sign, Fort Totten Park. Her flushed, cream-colored face was covered in blotchy red patches from crying. Dark brown hair stuck to her cheek where it had fallen out of her short ponytail. It was matted with blood from a cut on her forehead. The yellow tie in her hair matched the dress she was wearing. Both were discolored with dirt and grime. I sighed. There was nothing I could do for the imaginary girl, lost only to me. I looked up into the mirror in the shower. Bright green eyes stared back at me. Green eyes that were the exact shape and color as those of my 2 brothers. Someone had left a razor on the little shelf beneath the mirror. It reminded me I needed to shave before work. I ran my hand over the roughness on my cheeks and jaw, then through my short black hair that wasn't as short as I'd like. And a haircut too, I thought, as I stepped out of the shower. "Hey, Lochlan," said the blonde teenager behind the counter on my way out. "How was your swim?" I adjusted a thin chain under my shirt. A small stone at the end of it settled on my chest before I answered. "Hi, Ella," I said, ignoring her question. At 6:20 a.m., her cheeriness was unsettling. "I notice your membership is up for renewal," she told me with a bright smile. "Would you like to do that now?" "No, thanks," I answered, pausing briefly at the doors. "Okay," she said, still beaming. "Have an awesome day." "Too late," I said under my breath as I left. March air hit my face when I stepped outside the community center. The swim hadn't rid my mind of the lost girl as I hoped it would, so I tightened the strap of my gym bag and ran home. I took a slight detour on my way to pass one of my thinking spots. An old oak tree stood tall and proud not far from where I lived, and it reminded me of my homeland and of my brothers. The sight of it brought me peace, short-lived though it was. Even with the detour, running cut a 30-minute walk by a third of the time. When I rounded the corner of my block, I saw my elderly neighbor having an argument with the community mailbox. I ran past my house, only slowing once I reached her. Mrs. Abernathy, I said, pushing my square-rimmed glasses up my nose. The glasses were thick and black. They helped me be less noticeable, more overlooked. I wanted to be invisible. Society tends to ignore the impoverished, and today, in 2047, laser eye surgery was more affordable than ever, which meant glasses were a sign of poverty. I used this to my advantage and wore them every day, despite my perfect vision. "How are you this morning?" I asked, waving to the small woman with dark chocolate skin and grey-streaked curls. "Oh, Lochlan, better for seeing you," she said, turning to look at me. My face broke into a smile. Mrs. Abernathy's southern drawl and kind face had a way of doing that to me. "You're up early," she said, adjusting her vivid green handbag on her shoulder and tucking a wisp of grey-black hair behind her ear. "I went for a swim." She returned my smile before grimacing at the mailbox. "I moved into the neighbourhood almost 3 years ago. On my very first afternoon, while I was unloading the moving van I'd rented, I met Mrs. Abernathy. She called me over, insisted I take a break, and offered me some of her homemade sweet tea. Many a hot summer afternoon had been spent thus. We both carried the accents of her homeland. It made the stories we shared all the better. She would tell me about growing up in the deep south, and I would tell her Celtic folk tales. In reality, I was telling her about my childhood, too. She just didn't know it. "I don't know what is with this darn thing," she said, placing her thumb to the scanner pad beside her mailbox over and over again, receiving nothing but an angry beep in return. "But it's not working." "Why don't you let me have a look?" I said, pulling my phone out of my pocket. I worked for a technology and security company. That fact alone was usually sufficient explanation as to how I fixed things using my phone. I didn't need the phone. It was a prop. I'm a caster, or at least that's what I call myself. Saying I'm a demigod, while accurate, would show hubris. The bottom line was I worked with magic. Mrs. Abernathy stepped back, allowing me access to the box. I pretended to fiddle with the scanner pad while I muttered a few words under my breath and brushed the back of my hand over the black square. "What was that, dear?" she asked from behind me. "I think it was a glitch. Why don't you try it again?" She beamed at me and took a slow step forward. Contrary to popular opinion, magic and technology worked brilliantly together if you knew what you're doing. And yes, magic with a capital M, because magic is a name. Magic is alive. "Oh!" she cried as the scanner turned green under her thumb. A door popped open to reveal several envelopes. "You fixed it." "Hardly," I shrugged. Seeing the multitude of letters she pulled from the small square, I said, "I can't believe you get so much mail. I'm jealous." "Maybe I'll start writing you, shall I?" she said, with a devilish gleam in her eye. "With the price of postage these days, I wouldn't let you." "And then you might never speak to me again, and you know how much I enjoy that." "I do," I said. If only she had heard me speak when I was in school 5 years ago. There, my thick accent was unremarkable. Here, it would get me noticed. I used to be able to speak without it completely, but for some reason it came back to me at school. I haven't been able to shake it since. "Can I walk you home?" I asked her, offering my arm. "I'm going that way." "Why, thank you, dear," she said, placing her hand in the crook of my elbow after tucking her mail into her aggressively bright handbag. She walked at a brisk pace I was only prepared for because this exact scene had played itself out several times over the past few years. Mrs. Abernathy filled me in on her favourite soap operas as we walked the half-block to our side-by-side front doors. She lived in 34B, and I in 34A. After going up a few steps, she reached over the little wall that separated our respective porches and waved me towards her. Reaching out, she patted me on the cheek. If the wall were any higher, she wouldn't have managed it. "You're a good boy," she said with a sad smile. "How come I never see you bringing any girls over?" "Oh, I didn't know what to say. Sorry, Mrs. Abernathy, but any relationship I had would be built on a lie that I was human. Been there, and I don't want to do it again." No, I couldn't say that. "Oh, boys," Mrs. Abernathy said, misinterpreting my hesitation. "I don't judge, dear. In fact, I know this wonderful bar." "No," I laughed. "I don't get out much is all." "Oh, we'll try, won't you?" she said, stepping to her front door, punching in the unlock code, and laying her palm above the doorknob. "Otherwise, as soon as they come up with some anti-aging technology, I'll just keep you for myself." "If only," I said, putting in my own door code. "Locker!" A familiar voice carried across the chart tech and security lobby. "Jane," I replied to the 20-something man walking towards me. "How are you?" "One day I'm going to get here earlier than you," he said as he pulled the drawstring of his zip-up hoodie back and forth. I gave him a wry grin. It was a bit of a running joke. I always seemed to enter the building steps ahead of him. Even on days when Jenner came in early, somehow, I would come in early too. It was something neither of us could explain. "I'm good," he said as he walked to the elevators. "Better after I saw this gorgeous blonde at the coffee shop around the corner. Did you ask for his number? Madre de Dios, with eyes like that, he wouldn't give me the time of day." Jenner wasn't unattractive. Confidence was his biggest problem. He was tall, only a little shorter than my 6'2". His warm copper skin hinted at his mixed heritage, and his puppy dog brown eyes made him look 19 when he was closer to 25. Jenner was my only friend in the city. Well, that's not true, I thought. I guess I was friends with his sister, Cam. I made a mental note to call her. "Anyway," he went on, "I saw him flirting with some skinny little muchacha who was flipping her hair like she had a tick or something." He moved his head back and forth in a jerky robotic imitation of someone brushing long hair over their shoulder. "That seems like some misplaced anger, my friend," I said, stifling a laugh at the looks Jenner was getting from the people behind us. The ding of the elevator sounded, and we got on. In turn, everyone in the elevator pressed his or her palm to the scanning pad. After a few moments, an automated voice told us we were going down. The elevators at Chartech only allowed 5 to ride at a time, and there were no floor numbers to press. Instead, the system took you where you needed to go after it scanned your palm and looked up your file. No one ever got off on the wrong floor here. "It's not misplaced anger," Jenner said, his light accent increasing with his irritation. She was proudly wearing a right water's pin on her oh-so-lovely blazer. I sighed while Jenner swore in Spanish. Currently making headlines was the Right Waters Party. They were getting coverage because of their strong support of a new immigration bill. Though Jenner and his parents were born in this country, his ancestors had been immigrants. Long before his mother's grandparents had walked across the border to find a new life in the land of the free, his father's side had been brought over in the belly of a crowded ship. As a result, Jenner kept himself well informed of the goings-on in our nation's capital. "Then she deserves your anger," I said with a serious nod. "Okay," he said, throwing me a sideways look in exchange for my sarcasm. "Maybe not her specifically, but I just... He abruptly switched to Spanish, and I tuned him out. After 3 years of knowing Jenner, I knew once he got going, it was best to let him go. The rest of my day passed without incident. My job of tech support was busied, yet monotonous. It was more often a matter of resetting a system than fixing it. These days, everyone and everything had a system. Unless you crossed the river into Lowtown, you'd be hard-pressed to find a building that still used keys or a store that still accepted cash. Everything had gone digital. Chartech and security took care of all things related to technological systems and private security. From phones to computers, banks to mailboxes, Chartech did it all. And yet, somehow, in this age of technology, "Have you tried turning it off and then on again?" was the phrase I used more than any other. 8 hours to the second after I had walked into the building, I was walking out. As I headed out of the front doors, I saw my bus nearing the stop at the end of the block. Like so many times before, I had to make a split-second decision: wait the 9 minutes until the next bus came, or sprint down the street in a vain attempt to catch this one. It wasn't cold out. Being the warmest March on record, waiting wasn't so bad. But who liked to wait? I clutched my messenger bag and took off down the street. The driver saw me running and, with a vengeful grin, he closed the door and drove off as the light turned green. I got there in time to bang on the tail end of the bus as it passed. I cursed under my breath and sighed. If there is one lesson a long life will teach you, it's how to let go of the little things. Sitting down on a bench inside the bus shelter, I looked up at the images flashing across the glass wall to my right. Curious as to the time of the next bus, I stood and approached it. The bottom half of the glass wall was a 24-hour news station with a ticker tape running across the top. Above that were tiny, flashing squares with rounded edges of blue, red, or green. Each square had a number in it, signifying a bus route. I tapped twice on a blue square with a large 16 in the center. It revealed a drop-down list displaying the time of the next buses. "Delays," an automated voice intoned. "Next trip, 21 minutes. "Brilliant," I said. The drop-down list disappeared. As I started to turn away from the screen, something caught my eye. I stared at the image of a smiling young girl with dark brown hair and a rosy complexion that had taken the place of the news anchor. I'm sorry. I'd bumped into a man when I took a step backwards to get a better look at the screen. He looked exhausted and made a beeline for the bench in the corner of the bus shelter. He sat so he could lean against two walls at the same time and seemed to immediately fall asleep. I took another 2 steps backwards and sat beside him. At this distance, I could better read the bold words written beneath the face of the girl who was the focus of my nightmare. What? No, I muttered to myself as I read, for Totten Park. Oh, so sad, said the man beside me. I turned to look at him. They found that poor girl's body. What? I said again, shifting to face him. His skin had grey undertones and dark circles drooped under his eyes. Did you not hear? He said, looking at me through one half-open, very blue eye. The girl they thought had run away or been kidnapped or got lost or something. Melinda? He said, letting his eye close all the way as he struggled to remember her name. Melanie, I supplied, not knowing when I had learned that. Oh, so you did hear. Melanie, that's right, Melanie Connor. Yes, I stopped. I could hardly tell this man I had heard the girl's name in a dream. Luckily, he kept speaking, and I didn't have to come up with a response. Poor girl, he said, his blue eyes searching my face. I feel for her family. Remind me of what happened, I asked. She went missing a few days ago. They found her body in Fort Totten Park. Oh, he said, peeking down at his watch. Maybe 4 hours ago. They say if they found her even an hour earlier, she might have made it. No idea what happened. Gods, I said, not knowing what to say. That's... Yeah, the man said. We sat in silence for a few minutes before he truly fell asleep. It was the snoring that clued me in. 20 minutes later, when the bus arrived, I shook him awake. Thanks, he said, before stumbling onto the bus, finding a seat and falling asleep again. The ride home was 35 minutes, with a 10-minute walk on the other end. It took longer than that for my mind to attempt to make sense of my prophetic dream. That's even what it was. As soon as I got home, I started towards my office to look into the girl's disappearance. My single-mindedness was interrupted by an angry growl from my stomach. I remembered there was some leftover chicken thigh soup in the fridge. I heated it in the microwave before taking it to my office. I set the bowl of hot soup down on my desk, carefully avoiding anything that might make it tip over. Then I started my search. One of the advantages of working for a tech and security company was there were few systems beyond my reach, and if there was one I couldn't get into, I would ask Jenner to hack it for me. I may be a caster, but when it came to computers, he's the whiz. It took me under 5 minutes to get into the city's police department system. Once inside, a quick search revealed the missing persons file I was looking for. Melanie Connor, age 5, disappeared from a friend's backyard on Saturday afternoon during a birthday party. It took anywhere from 5 minutes to 2 hours for the host of the party to notice her absence. It's rare for a child to go missing. In the mid-2030s, it became commonplace for parents to have their children wear locators in the form of a bracelet or a necklace, in case they got lost or, for some, broke the curfew. Melanie's parents had told the police she knew how to use a locator and how to set off the panic alarm. The locator bracelet was found on Sunday. It wasn't working. Her body was found in a small patch of trees that bordered the southwest side of Fort Totten Park. There was no indication of abuse or sexual assault. The autopsy scan to determine the girl's cause of death was inconclusive, and a true autopsy would have to be done. Gods below, I said, leaning back in my chair. I looked at the bowl of soup, forgotten. Picking it up, I brought the spoonful to my lips. It was cold. I didn't care. I ate it quickly. Would I have been able to save this girl's life? Was I supposed to have figured it out somehow? How could I have known it wasn't just a dream? Was this my fault? I asked myself. Could my soul bear the weight of yet another death if it was? By the time I was done thinking myself in circles, I was mentally and physically exhausted. I went into the kitchen to wash the bowl and spoon for my soup. I got ready for bed, thinking of Melanie and what I could have, or perhaps should have, done. It might have been minutes, or mayhap it was hours, before I fell asleep. Either way, I woke the next morning tired, blaming myself for the death of a young girl. Chapter 2. The early morning sun bounced off the pinned-up, professional black bun at the back of the woman's head. Flawless terracotta skin was pulled together between her perfect eyebrows. Frustration clear in her face. Her fingers tapped quickly on her phone as she walked down the busy street. The pale pink of her nails matched the shade on her lips that were turned down in disapproval at what she was reading. She slowed and started to turn. Pausing, she looked up at the street signs, Arlington and Metcalfe. Shaking her head, she kept walking straight. Her fingers flashed across the screen of her phone as she cut through the crowd. The height of her heels didn't slow her brisk pace as she continued down the street. Making an angry sound, she pressed a spot behind her ear to turn on her earpiece. She spoke in an irritated tone. The conversation was over quickly. The woman returned to tapping her screen. Stopping at a busy intersection, she looked up for the signal to walk. Cars whizzed by until the light turned red. Moments later, after seeing the walk signal light up on the other side of the intersection, the woman hurriedly stepped into the street and, breaking glass, a screech of tires, a sickening crunch of bone, and the dull thunk-thunk of a skull meeting metal and in the hard asphalt. Blood pooled, people screamed, and I jerked awake. Another nightmare. My breath was coming heavy and fast, heart pounding in my chest. I lay still, staring at the imperfections of the white paint above me, waiting for my heart rate to return to normal. I noticed a crack in the corner of my room, and the beginnings of water damage before I processed what I had dreamed. It had been 3 weeks since Melanie Connor's body was found, and not one day had gone by that I hadn't thought of her. Over that time, I'd gone back and forth on what I would do if this happened again. After the mental tennis match, I decided no matter how stupid I felt, or how ridiculous it seemed, if I had another nightmare like that, I would try to find a person. Arlington and Metcalfe, I whispered to the damaged ceiling. Business district, not far from Parliament. I waved my hand over the bedside clock. Angry red numbers appeared in the air above the small black rectangle. 5:23. I had no idea what time the woman was going to be there. I didn't know her name. I didn't know where she worked or even what day this was going to happen. But I did know the cross street, and I knew it was early morning. I closed my eyes, trying to remember where the sun was as it peeked between the tall buildings. I was certain it had been before 9. I'd go today, and if she wasn't there, I'd go again tomorrow. I pictured her face in my head. The stern, masculine features. She looked familiar, something to do with the news, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Arlington and Metcalfe, I said again, swinging my legs out of bed. That's a start. I stood in the alcove of a tall building a few doors down from the corner where I had dreamed the woman would be. My eyes scanned the crowd. The sun was barely up, and the mass of suit-clad pedestrians was not as thick as in my dream. She wouldn't be here yet. I waited. After about 10 minutes, I saw her. A head of brown hair and a business-like bun, and eyes turned down to her phone. Bright red lips, cream-coloured skin. No, not her. The woman I was waiting for had terracotta skin and black hair. This one wore a deep green peacoat to protect against the cool spring morning. The woman in my dream wore black. 30 minutes later, I thought I saw her, but this woman with pale pink lips had alabaster skin and didn't attempt to turn down the wrong street. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat to remember the rich red-brown of the woman's skin tone. The street grew busier as the sun climbed slightly higher in the clear sky. Had it been a clear sky in my dream? I wondered. I was certain it had. I could remember the sun finding the long lines of space between the tall buildings. I looked down at my watch, not wanting to miss her if she came by at exactly the wrong moment. Within the next half hour, I would not only be late for work, but it would be too late in the morning for the light to match my memory. If she didn't show up soon, I would come back tomorrow. I walked slowly over to lean against the post that labelled the intersecting streets. Perhaps I was being crazy. Perhaps Melanie Connor was some kind of wild coincidence. I must have seen the newscast about her, forgotten it, then dreamed of her later on. The Fort Totten Park bit was harder to explain. Or mayhap I hadn't dreamed that part at all. My mind could have put it there later. I crossed my arms as insecurities swirled in my mind. The chill morning air bit through my thin, long-sleeved shirt, but I didn't mind. I stayed where I was, leaning against the signpost. I'd promised myself I would wait for the woman. "Oh, I'm sorry," said someone, bumping into me. "I should be more aware, this damn thing." She looked down at her phone. "No problem," I said, still wrapped up in my own misgivings. "Just one of those mornings." Her pale pink lips gave me a strained smile before going back to her phone and walking away. I returned to scanning the group of passing people when my eyes caught up with my brain. I whipped around trying to find her. Her. The woman from my dream. Pride and triumph rose in my chest. I was right to come. I was right to wait. Could this be my second chance? My redemption and my opportunity to make up for deeds long done? I saw the sun gleaming off her dark hair and weaved my way through the crowd to catch up. I followed at a distance of a few feet, glad I hadn't lost her in a melee of people because of my delayed reaction. She cut through the sea of suits, which only slowed her slightly, but enough to allow me to catch up. Once I was walking behind her, I heard the angry phone conversation. I don't care what your excuses are. A deadline is a deadline, and if you want to publish that piece on Right Waters on my site and not just on your little blog, then you will get it to me in the next 90 minutes. She paused, listening to the response of whomever she was scolding. Yes, she said. Yes, she went through the same thing you're going through now. Okay, yes. Well, she's gorgeous. What do you expect? That's why she has an interactive video blog attached to the... Your blog doesn't. Because she brings in viewers. You know what? I don't care. Get it done or go back to answering her fan mail. She hung up the phone. I followed her for another 2 blocks before she stopped and waited for the walk signal, still tapping on her device. I noticed there was a small gap between a woman and the people around her. Though the crowd at the light was growing, no one dared move closer to her. When I looked harder, I saw the small sideways glances, the nods to friends and colleagues. Who is this woman? I thought, before my mind returned to the task at hand. I tried to move behind her, close enough to grab her, as if everything would play out as in my dream. My route was blocked by 2 men in long overcoats. No way, no way, one said. I swear, the other replied. Excuse me? I said, trying to push through. I was ignored. My heart started beating loud in my ears. What if I couldn't get to her? What if these 2 linebackers prevented it? My body tensed as I weighed my options. The light would change any second. Nartha, I said under my breath, asking magic for strength and feeling its consent. The white light flashed its consent across, only a breath before the woman stepped into the street. Yes, that's her, linebacker 1 said. That's Adrian. Hey! I easily shoved the 2 of them apart as the woman stepped into the street. Time seemed to slow. An engine revved. I stepped towards her. The woman turned her head. I was only a foot away now. A collective gasp rose from behind me at the same time as she realized she was going to be hit. Her face contorted. And she was hit. But not by the car. I slammed into her and our bodies flew forward. I managed to turn us in the air so she landed on me and not the hard ground. Better it was my head hitting the concrete. And it did. Hard. Everything went black, but only for a moment. When the world came back to me in a rush, I saw a crowd had formed around us. I tried to blink the stars out of my eyes and ignore the beginnings of a massive headache. Slowly, I loosened my hold on the woman. Are you all right? I asked, talking over the many other voices inquiring the same thing. A few people yelled curses at the driver, now long gone. Huh? She said, trying to focus. Are you all right? I repeated. A few people helped her up and out of the middle of the street. I followed, picking up one of her black high-heeled shoes that must have fallen off when I hit her. I felt a strong pounding in my head. Concussion, I thought. No question. After seeing the woman and I were both okay, the small gathering dispersed. I placed the shoe at her feet. She kept a hand on my shoulder as she slid her foot in. Prince Charming, she said. Her breathing returned to normal. You saved my life, and my favorite pair of shoes. I don't know which I'm more indebted to you for. I'm just happy I was here to help, I said, standing. The woman looked up at me. Even in heels, she was several inches shorter than I was. In her mid to late 40s, I noticed the minute grooves in her face, evidence that she smiled as much as she frowned. Thank you, she said in earnest. Then, reaching into her bag, she pulled out a card. I don't know what kind of business you're in, she continued, her tone professional and sharp. She was back to all business. If modeling is a path you're interested in, I know a few people who would like your look. Here. She handed me the black rectangular piece of paper as I shifted uncomfortably. It was most definitely not a path I was interested in, but I took the card. Looking down at it, I saw her name in silver ink printed neatly above her title. I'm Adrian Jace. My jaw dropped. I did know her. Everyone in the city knew her. Adrian Jace, founder of Jace Co., a media magnate. She was not only one of the wealthiest people in the city, but a prominent advocate for Indigenous rights on a world stage. Wow, I said dumbly. She smiled. It transformed her face from the gritty businesswoman into someone warm. I imagined this was who she was when she wasn't fighting against misogyny and stereotypes so often tied to her people. Let me know if I can help you out with anything. Turning away from me, she headed across the street. I grinned as she paused and let a few people cross in front of her before turning back to me. I owe you one. Then she waved and disappeared into the crowd. I slid her card into my pocket at the same time as my phone rang. Dano, I swore. I'm late for work. Good afternoon, Mr. Rousseau, Chart Tech Division. My name is Lochlan. What can I do for you today? I said to the image of a middle-aged man with black hair and olive-toned skin. There was a loud beeping in the background. Can he even hear me, I wondered. I can't get this damn alarm to turn off, he shouted, which answered both my questions. Right, I can hear that. I assume you've tried scanning your thumb, and it didn't work? No, he said with awe, like I'd given him the secret to the universe. I hadn't thought of that. What a novel idea. He glared at me. I'm sorry, but you would be surprised how many times that works. Can you show me the room to ensure you are alone and not being coerced to deactivate the alarm? Mr. Rousseau groaned in response, but showed the room. Thank you, sir. Is the scanning pad malfunctioning? How the hell would I know that? He yelled. Could you scan your thumb and show me what happens? I've put in the request to cancel emergency services. A 4x6-inch panel came into view, and it was flashing an angry red. Mr. Rousseau placed his thumb in a black square outline. For a moment, the panel turned green. There was a second of silence before the panel went back to red, and the alarm started again. Aye, I said, typing quickly. I think I can fix the problem easily enough if you give me remote access. It should be all cleared up in a couple of minutes. Thank God. Can you give me the number on the side of the device we're speaking on? Why do you need that number? He asked, obviously suspicious. Don't you have my system numbers on file? Dunno, I thought. Usually they didn't ask. I quickly tapped for a few seconds before there was a slight glitch in the video. Are you still there? He asked, even though he could see me. If you give me the number on your device, I'll be able to use it to turn off the alarm. He opened his mouth, probably to ask why I couldn't do it with just his name and passcode. I could do it with your name and passcode, I told him. But not only would that take longer, but this way it gives me better access to your security system. What I didn't tell him was I would hack into his system to do it. There was another quick glitch on the screen. This time he ignored it and rattled off the number. All calls were recorded and stored. Forever. I've worked at Chart Tech in security for 3 years, and in the first week I learned it was easier to hack a home system than spend time getting all the clearance information. The more security questions I asked, and the longer the alarm was on, the angrier the client got. It's not strictly allowed. I cut those bits of conversation out of the recordings. Great, I said. Now scan your thumb. Perfect. Got it. Just a second. A replica of his scanning device and security dock was projected in front of me in blue light. Through the rendering, I was able to manipulate the 3D image to see where the damage was. There's a crack in the second layer of the scanning screen on your device, I told him. What in God's name does that? Oh. He had started yelling, but halfway through his sentence the alarm turned off. You will have to get it replaced. Can I send someone today? I used to fight shoulder to shoulder with a god, I thought bitterly as I pulled up the day's schedule. My brain was still foggy from the hit I'd taken this morning. I cursed my slow healing. It used to be faster, back when I was with my brothers. They could be there in the next 45 minutes, I told him. Sure, the man said, and he hung up. I used to fight with gods, and now I'm hacking home systems. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, I muttered to myself. Then I mentally recoiled at my use of the expression. I'd never wanted to be mighty. Not really. I wanted to protect my people, my brother's people. I wanted to protect my family. An image of 3 men flooded my mind. The one in the middle was broad-shouldered and strongly built. He carried a sword at his hip, and his long dark hair was braided down his back. To his right, but for the blade, stood his mirror image. And to his left, well, even at 6'2", I was dwarfed by my brothers. Both in height and breadth. Where my brother's hair was long, mine was short. Where they wore heavy fur pelts, I wore a thin shirt. I preferred to feel the bite of the chill pre-dawn air. But mighty we were, I whispered. And no longer, I thought. I knew I had to stay hidden. To do that, I had to lead a monotonous life. I sighed once before ending my pity party. I looked at the timer on the top of the screen. "That's 37, I said. Then I tapped a code into the wall on my right, and a window slid open to reveal a man at an identical station. "No, sir," said Jenner from the workstation next to mine. His accented words hinted at his first language. When Jenner was 2 and Cam was a newborn, their older sister, Mariana, had a seizure and was never the same. She was 5 at the time. Jenner was sent to live with his maternal grandparents, while his mother and father cared for Camille and Mariana. When Cam was 2, she followed him. They moved back when Jenner was 11 and Cam was 9. It wasn't an easy transition. I rested my chin on the sill of the window that opened up between us and listened to Jenner try to talk over a loud alarm going off in the back of his call.
"Now, sir, I am only trying to help. If you could allow me to get a bit more information from you, I can—" The line went dead.
"Hey, Jenner," I said to him, with a sympathetic look. He gave me a very rude hand gesture.
"I have to call the strict back and fix his system," he said.
"You know he's already on a call with someone else. I'd meant to feed."
"Death first,"
he said. My eyes flicked down to the T-shirt under his red hoodie. Those same words were printed over an image of a man with a little moustache. "What did you get today?" I asked. Jenner and I had a competition. How many calls we could close in under 5 minutes over the course of an 8-hour shift. Jenner was by far the superior hacker, but he refused to use those skills at the office. I didn't.
"1 million,
he said. I scoffed.
"You were late,"
he said, upset about his loss.
"You're never late. Where were you?"
"Nowhere," I said, trying to sound as uninterested as possible. "I was just late."
"Yeah, whatever. You don't want to tell me where you were? Fine, lie to me," he said. "I'm never covering for you again."
"I'm not lying."
"Uh-huh."
Jenner could always tell when I was lying. "How many did you get today?" I asked again, not so subtly changing the subject.
27,
he said in a defeated voice. Then he braced for a losing blow. "You?" 27, I said, trying to look bothered by it.
"Liar,"
he told me with a crooked smile. I shrugged.
"I had one person hang up on me today because she said I had taken someone's job. Lady."
Jenner threw his hands in the air.
"It's 2047.
He followed with a small rant in Spanish. "Did you call her back?" I asked.
"Madre de Dios, no, I didn't call her back. How many people hang up on you because of your accent?"
he asked. I don't think he expected an answer. We both knew it was 0. "Sorry." I knew how much he let those calls get to him. Over the past few days, the majority of news outlets were reporting on the new immigration policy put forward by the Right Waters Party. It would require all 3rd and 4th generation immigrants to put their country of origin on their personal identification. People were scared. Scared people were stupid. "Want to go grab a beer after work? On me?" I asked him. His face brightened immediately. He was so easy. Easy to please, easy to make smile. And it was easy for him to see the good in people. He made me see the good in people too, even when I was unsure of its existence. Chapter 3.
"Latte, double the espresso, and no cinnamon."
The man's words were sharp. The woman behind the counter hastily tapped on an order sleeve before setting a disposable green cup with its white logo on a slow-moving conveyor belt.
"No cinnamon,"
the man repeated. He was wearing an expensive navy suit.
"Thanks, doll."
He gave her an appraising look before turning to glance at the long line behind him.
"You guys busy like this all the time?" "That'll be 1550, please. And we usually quiet down around 10.
"Uh-huh," he said. He wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on a young woman, a few people behind him in line. 1550? The woman behind the counter said, as she offered the pay pad. The man absent-mindedly placed his thumb on the pad before walking towards the young woman he had been eyeing. "Hello," he said, giving her a well-rehearsed half-smile. She looked up at him brightly.
"If I'd seen you sooner, I'd have offered to buy your morning coffee."
Her bright expression faded.
"Thanks, maybe next time,"
she said in a polite attempt to shut him down.
"Sure."
He winked at her, not taking a hint and looking at her up and down.
"How about tomorrow? Do you come here every morning before work?"
"Latte, double shot of espresso, no cinnamon," called the barista as she placed a cup on an open space counter.
"Call me,"
he said, giving the girl his card. He flashed the exact same half-smile at her again before turning to get his drink. He bumped into someone on the way to the pickup counter.
"Watch it, man,"
he said. The man muttered something before walking away.
"No cinnamon?"
he asked. examining the contents of the cup before putting on the lid. "Hey." He snapped his fingers at one of the women working behind the bar. "I'm allergic to cinnamon. Gives me hives. Is there cinnamon in this?" The woman shook her head, and he nodded before leaving the cafe. He stood outside the coffee shop and took a sip of his drink. "Nice," he said. The comment was directed at a pair of women walking past, as much as it was to his coffee. "Beep, beep, beep." He coughed a little and loosened the navy blue tie. "Beep, beep, beep." After walking only a few steps, he coughed again, harder this time. "Beep, beep, beep." Bending over, he placed his hands on his knees. He tried to breathe. His latte fell to the ground at his feet. He fell beside it. I gasped and bolted upright. A loud beeping filled my bedroom. My alarm clock. Looking over, I saw the spilled water glass beside my bed. I must have knocked it over at some point during my... what? Vision? Nightmare? I rubbed my eyes and thought hard. Another one. Looking over at the clock, I waved my hand to silence the alarm and reveal the time, 7:30. How many times had I hit snooze? Mourning the loss of the swim I'd wanted to get in before I went to work, I sat up. Not only had I slept in, but now I had to find some random coffee shop. I was going to be late for work. Pulling my watch off my bedside table and adjusting the chain around my neck, I pressed a button on the side of the watch. "Call Jenner." "Calling Jenner," an automated voice echoed. After a few moments of ringing, he picked up.
"Locker,"
he said, dragging out the R in the nickname. His face filled the square space of my watch for a moment before I was looking at the sidewall of his home office. Let me guess. He was chipper and sounded like he'd been up for hours. "Yes, Jenner, I'll let you guess." I waited and heard the dull thunking sound of his nailless fingers hitting the key screen with more force than necessary.
"You are going to be late and you want me to cover for you."
"Why else would I call you this early?" I asked, getting out of bed and walking to the bathroom.
"No reason, Locker, no reason at all."
No, he interrupted. "Still my turn." "Apologies," I said. I put my watch on the counter beside the sink before grabbing my toothbrush.
"You slept through your alarm, Because you..."
"Am I allowed to speak now?" I asked before starting to brush my teeth.
"No, shut up,"
he said sharply.
"I'm thinking because you had a vision..."
My chest tightened, and I almost choked on a toothbrush. How the hell did he know that?
"Of yourself getting murdered, and now you're afraid to leave your pathetic excuse for a house,"
he finished with less accuracy. "My house is not pathetic," I said, spitting and rinsing.
"Well, I wouldn't know since you've never invited me over."
"True enough, friend," I said. "I'll make you trade." I paused, deliberately to pique his interest.
"I'm listening."
"I'll have you over for pizza and beer if you cover for me today."
"That's twice in as many weeks, Locker."
He was right. It was only last week I'd been late because I was waiting for Adrian Chase.
"I'm going to want a reason as well as pizza. And beer,"
he added as an afterthought. "You will be content with pizza."
"And beer,"
he repeated. "And beer and any video game you would like to attempt to beat me at," I said, scooping up my watch and headed to the kitchen.
"Deal,"
he said with enthusiasm.
"You are so going down. RG just came out with a new system, and of course I have it."
"The G-Flat 760? I asked. I'd wanted to try that system. Don't they look like the old laptops from 30 years ago?
See, except they don't open, and if you get through a certain level of war games, it projects a scene through the entire room.
"I hate war games," I said, pulling a French press out of a high cupboard in my kitchen. The image of my brothers and I preparing for battle invaded my mind. I missed them. I missed having a purpose in my life other than staying off the radar, and I'd been through too many real wars to enjoy the idea of a simulated one. "You know I like the vintage games," I said.
"I'll think of something for you. Any idea what time you'll be in?"
"After 9:30? I hope no later than 10. I looked at the clock that now read 7:35 and remembered what the barista had said.
"I hope it's a sexy chick keeping you up so late that you have to sleep till 10,
he said, excited.
"And I want to hear all about her."
"You wish," I said, filling my kettle with water.
"There's a chick?"
he practically shouted. The dull, rhythmic thunking stopped as his face filled the square space of my watch. "Goodbye, Jenner. See you in a couple of hours." I clicked off, shaking my head at the shrinking image of my friend's face before the ticking hands of a clock replaced it. It took some time to figure out where the guy would be, but it did. I also named him Douche. Anyone who winks that much should be called by no other name. Perhaps I was being harsh. I had a good friend from my school years who was a winker. I mentally cringed as I remembered my dislike upon meeting him for the first time. It didn't help that he had classic good looks and charmed everyone he met. Perhaps this man too was all right, once you got to know him. There was no street signs in my dream, and I hadn't seen the name of the cafe Douche was in, but the distinctive cup helped narrow it down. There were 3 Ridgebean coffee houses in the city, and their cups were solid green with a white logo. They were a local chain, and only one of them was located in a business district. I assumed it was the business district because of the way people in line were dressed. By 8:30, I was back downtown, only a few blocks away from Arlington and Metcalfe, as chance would have it. Waiting outside the Ridgebean, I searched the faces of the passers-by. Anyone who was tall, blonde, and handsome caught my eye as a potential candidate. I even followed one into the store, but he was so polite to the woman behind the counter I knew it couldn't be him. As I stood waiting, I reflected on a scene I'd dreamed. There was no reason someone who was deathly allergic to cinnamon would chance going into a coffee shop with so much cross-contamination. "Gives me hives," I remember Douche saying. Couldn't have been the cinnamon that killed him. Then he turned away with his cup and bumped into someone before leaving. He drank his coffee and collapsed. Perhaps he had already been poisoned before entering the coffee shop, and I was too late. But then, why would I have dreamed it? Maybe the man who bumped into him had done something. I made a mental note to try and see who that man was and prevent the collision. I looked down at my watch and saw it was almost 9:30. The server had said they slowed down by 10. He should be here any minute, or mayhap it wouldn't happen today. "Nice," I heard from behind me. Bingo. A woman with a confident stride passed me, trailed by a tall, blond man whom I followed into Ridgebean. I thought I had gone in right behind him, but there were 4 people between us in line. In front of me was a smallish woman in a pencil skirt and heels. Looking at her more closely than I was able to in my dream, I saw she was hardly older than 18, where Douche looked about 30. What a creep. "No cinnamon," I heard him say for the second time. "Thanks, doll." He practically leaned over the counter to check the server out before saying, "You guys busy like this all the time?" "That'll be 15:50, please. And we usually quiet down around 10. "Uh-huh," he said. I could see his eyes light up when they fell on the girl ahead of me in line. 15:50? She asked again. Douche pressed his thumb on the pad and walked away. "Excuse me," I said to the girl, thinking I'd save her the trouble of Douche's attentions. I waved a finger over my watch before lifting it to eye level. My watch has been glitching all morning. I showed her the small screen flickering between a clock and a static blue-green. "Can I bother you for the time?" "Hello," Douche said, giving her a half-smile. Yep, he worked on that in the mirror. She looked up at him with confusion before turning back to me to give me the time. She opened her mouth to speak. He interrupted her. "If I had seen you sooner," Douche said, stepping closer to her, "I'd have offered to buy your morning coffee." "I'm sure," she said a little coldly, before she pointedly turned away from him. "Sorry, it's about 9:40, 9:42, if you're able to set that thing." She glanced sympathetically at my flickering watch. "I hope it's fixable," I said, looking down at it. "How about tomorrow?" said Douche. "Do you come here every morning before work?" "Latte, double shot of espresso, no cinnamon," called the barista as she placed a cup on an open space counter. "Call me," he said, giving her his card in a wink. He flashed the exact same half-smile at her again before turning away. The girl looked uncomfortable. "What a creep," I said. Her face softened when she turned to me. "I don't even know why I took the card," she said, looking at it as if confused. "Do you want me to go talk to him?" I asked, as I saw someone walk in and make a beeline for Douche. I moved quickly before she could give me an answer. "No cinnamon?" he asked, examining the contents of the cup before putting on the lid. "Hey!" He snapped his fingers at one of the women working. "I'm allergic to cinnamon, gives me hives. Is there cinnamon in this?" "Hey, man," I said, deliberately standing between him and his would-be attacker. Douche turned right into me. Scalding milk and coffee spilled down my front, but at the same time I felt something like a pinprick in my back. I gritted my teeth to keep any sound from escaping my lips as my skin burned and a numb sensation started to spread across my side. I turned to see the attacker, but he was already gone. "Nazca," I whispered with a hand on my side, performing a small cast. I immediately felt the slow-spreading numbness in my side cease. I would deal with it more thoroughly later. "What the hell, man?" Douche said angrily, shaking his latte-covered hands in my face. "What is your problem?" "I'm so sorry," I said, not meaning it. "Let me buy you another drink," Damn it, he said loud enough to quiet the coffee shop. I don't have time to wait in line, thanks, klutz. He bumped his shoulder into me as he left the cafe. You're welcome, I thought. The words sounded bitter, even in my head. Just because he's a jerk doesn't mean I should have let him die, right? Are you okay? Said a young woman who'd taken his card. You lost your spot, I said, gesturing to the long line. She handed me some napkins. Thanks for trying to say something, she said, shaking her head. I should be able to do it myself. I'm sorry it turned out so bad for you. That's all right, I answered. I just happen to have a change of clothes in my bag. Happens that often, huh? She laughed a little. Coincidence, I said. I was hoping to get a swim in after work. In your clothes? She asked. Touché, I thought. Go change, she ordered. I'll get back in line and get something for the both of us. What would you like? Coffee, I said. Black. She nodded and turned away. This redemption thing is great, I thought. Free coffee. A wave of pain stopped that cheery thought and nearly took me to the ground as I hurried into the bathroom. The cast binding whatever I had been stuck with was wearing off. I hurried into the stall to cast a more permanent cure. Then again, maybe not so great after all. Chapter 4. I sang one of my favourite songs from some 70 years ago as I slid the pizza into the oven. It had been a long time since I used the kitchen. I missed making pizza from scratch. It was long ago and it was far away and it was so much better than it is today. I sang as I ran upstairs to change out of my white t-shirt, now spotted with tomato sauce. In moments of self-doubt, I wondered if this new purpose of saving lives was worth potential exposure. As if my life, my secret, was so valuable people should die for it. More people, I said, bitterly as I thought of the things I had done to keep myself safe. I stripped off my red speckled t-shirt and pulled on a black one before heading back to check on the food. Pizza is my go-to home-cooked meal, and I'm very good at it. I wasn't always. Over the years, I'd had several culinary teachers who, by the end, had taught me more about the world than the kitchen. They had all saved my life in their own ways. When my eldest brother died, when he was drowned and murdered, I retreated from the world. I lived off the land for a long time, but eventually made my way back to society. Eternally 23, I had to move constantly, so the few people I saw regularly wouldn't notice I wasn't aging. It was a lonely existence. Then I met Helena. God, I loved her. We met around the turn of the millennia. Not this one, the one before. I went by Loic then. She had the kindest heart I've ever known, and taught me how to cook, among other things. I cast abundance spell, attaching myself to her life force. That way I aged as she did. We married, tried to have children. She miscarried 5 times. She decided it wasn't the will of the gods. When she died, the spell was broken. I became a young man again, and had to move on. After centuries of wandering, I met Rosamund. I told her my name was Lawrence. When you live as long as I have, sometimes you start to lose sight of the things that make you human. Rosamund reminded me. That woman was fiery. She was older than I was, too old to have children, but we were happy. I cast my abundance spell and aged with her. When she died, I was a young man again and forced to leave the home I'd made. Again, there was the emptiness of lonely years until Philip, the father I never had. He was the first person I told the truth to. After my brother died, I told him everything. I was fully myself with him. We travelled the world together, never staying anywhere long enough to cause suspicion as to why I wasn't aging. His death hurt the most. Perhaps because I was more myself with him than anyone else in centuries. I was honest. It made for a nice change. Helena may have started my cooking lessons, but Philip completed them. He was the one who taught me how to make the perfect pizza. I tapped on the oven light and looked in the little window. Most ovens today would monitor your food for you and turn off when whatever you were cooking was done. When I bought this house, part of the appeal was its lack of modernization. This was the first time I had tried Philip's recipe without him hovering over my shoulder. I looked behind me as though he was there. In a way, he still was. I heard the beep of the security system that told me when someone other than Mrs. Abernathy was walking up the path to my house. The system was one of my home's few upgrades. Standing up from my hunched position over the oven, I walked to the front door. An automated voice said, "Locator identification. Genso Valdonner Hernandez." What? I repeated aloud as I opened the door to let Jenner in. What exactly is your first name?
Jensu Donner, thank you very much, and no, my parents did not love me, he said.
Come on in. I gestured to the living room, visible from the front door. Does Cam have an equally extensive full name? I thought it was Camille.
It is,
he said, disgruntled.
She's their favourite.
Ha, I said dryly, closing the door behind him.
It smells amazing in here,
Jenner said.
You didn't make the pizza, did you?
Was I not supposed to? I asked. I hope it's all right. I haven't done it in a while. Making the dough had always been my favourite part. I think after Philip died, I didn't have it in me to do it without him.
I didn't imagine you knew how. Do they even have pizza in Ireland?
No, I said, laying on an accent as thick as I could, while still ensuring he'd be able to understand me.
We live on a liquid diet over there. We don't have food at all.
I linked the last two words together for effect.
The pizza's for you, and the beer is for me.
Yeah, Jenner said, as he stripped off his coat and hung it on the coat tree by the door. Removing his shoes, he stepped out of the front vestibule and looked around. Nice place. He couldn't see much from where he was standing, just the living room, the stairs up to the second floor, and the hallway that led to my eating kitchen. He walked down the hall, sniffing as he went.
How long before it's done?
He asked. Perhaps 15 minutes. Beer? Sure. He extended his hand after I took 2 cold bottles out of the freezer.
Is that where they keep beer where you come from?
These were room temperature 30 minutes ago, I explained.
Isn't that how you all like it over there? I went to England once. The server asked me if I wanted my beer extra cold. I asked if there was another way. She wasn't impressed.
I don't imagine so. I brought the bottle to my lips. We have time for a game before the pizza's done. Jenner gave me a crooked smile before heading into the living room. Timer expired. The disembodied voice said as the game paused. Oven temperature lowering to 170 degrees. I was lucky the timer went off when it did. I was about to get my head blown off. The game started up again as soon as the voice finished speaking. This is as good a time as any to stop, I said, hitting pause.
What, I was about to win,
Jenner said. Exactly. I stripped off the gloves, linking me to the G-flat. Player 2, forfeit. The game called after me as I walked into the kitchen. I can handle it, I said. I hate war games. I muttered the last part under my breath so Jenner couldn't hear. I pulled the pizza out of the oven and set it to cool on the granite countertop. Pulling out 2 large mismatched plates from a cupboard, I started to set the kitchen table. Jenner sat in one of the light wood chairs that matched the cupboards. It was only by chance that they matched. I'd gotten them second-hand. Make yourself useful and grab a couple more beers from the fridge, I said, searching a drawer for my pizza cutter. Did I have a pizza cutter?
This looks great. What's on it?
Jenner ignored me and got up to examine the pizza. Beer, I said again.
There is beer on the pizza?
He turned to me in amazement. There's beer in the fridge, I said. And yes, there's a little in the dough. He said, turning to the fridge and reappearing with 2 dark glass bottles in hand. He leaned over the hot mass of cheese and meat on the counter and breathed deeply through his nose. He repeated. There are a few different cheeses, I said. Some sausage and bacon, pepperoni. Is that acceptable?
I'm drooling. See, it's acceptable.
He took the beer to the table. I found a pair of scissors and shrugged. These'll do, I thought, and dished us each a couple of pieces. Seconds after sitting down across from each other, I got a question I thought Jenner would ask me the second he walked through the door.
So, Lochlan,
he said to a mouthful of pizza.
What have you been up to these days?
All right, so perhaps he didn't ask the exact question I thought he would.
Who's the chica keeping you up so late at night?
He added. There it was. There is no chica, I said honestly. Perhaps I should have lied. Sometimes it's easier that way. But I was sick of lying, and he could always tell. I've slept through my alarm a few times. I took a bite of pizza. It was sinfully good.
You call me at 7:30 and you live 45 minutes away from the office, he said. You can't tell me sleeping in was the reason you got to work at 10. Plus, you haven't been late in 3 years.
Shoot. What could I tell him? The truth.
Please tell me she's hot. You got a picture? What's her name?
He tapped his watch, no doubt opening the latest form of social media to search for her. There is no girl, I said again.
You know what?
He said, looking at me right in the eye.
I've never told you this, but I have a gift. I can always tell when someone is lying to me.
No, I thought. There's no way Jenner was a gifter. I would have noticed if his spark was bright enough to manifest in an extra ability. His inner power was as bright as any human's, and nothing more. He just thought he knew when people were lying to him. "Now I know there is no girl," he said. "Or at least if there is, she isn't the reason you've been coming late to work." He's right so far, I thought. "Just eat," I said, trying to deflect. "You know what? I will." He took a large bite, mumbling the rest through dough, cheese, and meat. "Not because you told me to, but because this is the best pizza I've ever had." For the next 20 minutes we ate and talked of other things. Politics mostly. Jenner was well informed. I was less so. I used to keep up with current affairs, but that was a lifetime ago. Now I had Jenner to tell me what was happening in the world. No, I said sarcastically when Jenner finished his rant about the blatant homophobia still surrounding blood and organ donation. "Don't get up. After making the pizza and providing the booze, I'll wash the dishes alone." "I am a guest," Jenner said, raising his thick eyebrows at me. "And I will sit here like the royalty I deserve to be treated as." "Uh-huh," I said, smiling as I took the plates off the table. "So what's there to do?" I asked in reference to the previous conversation. "Some countries are better than others. I think we are one of the last ones to still permanently differ, but," he sighed, "it floats in and out of the spotlight. Right Waters is doing their fear-mongering song and dance. Hey, is there dessert?" "You're still hungry," I said in shock. The pizza was big. I was hoping to have a slice left over for tomorrow's lunch. No chance. Jenner had eaten nearly 3/4 of it. If he had a gift, that was it. "No dessert?" "Well then," Jenner said, putting his feet on my kitchen table. I knocked them off. They found a home on a chair. "Instead, you can tell me why you've been late." "I have nothing to tell." I turned my back to him, putting dishes in the sink. "Liar," Jenner said, without a hint of question. "There is something to tell." "Fine, there is," I admitted. Hot water ran out of the faucet, and the soap started sudsing. "But you're not going to tell me." "That was more of a statement than a question," I said, avoiding the not quite a question. "Is it going to happen again?" he asked. Before I had a chance to answer, he added, "Because if it is, we will need to come up with a better system than calling and bribing me with food and drink." "What else should I bribe you with? Sexual favors?" I joked. "You are so not my type," he said with a shudder as he picked at the label on his beer. "Ouch," I said. The label peeled off Jenner's bottle in tiny strips that I was certain I would have to clean up later. "Tall with dark hair, see." He looked me up and down. "Don't take it too personally, but I don't go for lying pretty boys." "You think I'm pretty?" "Actually, no," he said, rising from the table and coming to stand beside me. I leaned away from him as he inspected my face. "Your features are too angular to be pretty. Those huge glasses do nothing to help your nose, which kind of ruins the whole cheekbones and jawline thing you got going on." "I'm truly heartbroken you think so," I said, as I searched for the dishcloth I'd lost somewhere in the soapy water. "Please stop describing me." He shrugged and sat back down, taking another beer from the fridge on his way. "Is there a girl at all?" he asked. "You don't quit, do you?" "Dude," he said, settling into his seat. "I have no life. All I have is living vicariously through you, and that's going terribly. Could you suck a little less, please? I'm sorry, I can't be of more help." "Pass me that mug, would you? There's still coffee in it," Jenner said as he obliged. Just as I went to take it, he paused. "Wait." He searched my face. "And keep my gift of truth-seeking in mind here, huh? Is there a girl?" "No." I said it more as a question. Big mistake. After that, the questions came hard and fast. "Who is she?" he demanded. "No." I grabbed a cup out of his hand and almost sloshed cold coffee all over the floor when I turned away from him. "Are you with her now?" "No." "She's an old girlfriend?" "No." "She broke your heart?" "No." "The one that got away?" "No." "And she didn't even know?" "Screw off." There was suddenly a spot on the pizza sheet that needed my full attention. "I told you, man," he said smugly, walking back over to the kitchen table. "It's a gift. What's her name?" I gave in. "Zamila," I said. "But I haven't seen her in a long time." "She had?" he asked. "She—" I paused my scrubbing before answering. "She's the most beautiful being I've ever seen in my entire life." It was true. Not just physical beauty, which she had in spades. Full lips, high cheekbones, and bright brown eyes you could get lost in. She had long dark hair that fell like a curtain down to her mid-back, and a body built for sin. But it wasn't just that. She was kind when no one was looking. Compassionate to her friends. She was fiercely loyal and smart. Man, she was smart.
Wow, Jenner said, dragging out the ooh. You got it bad, huh? How long was I out? I asked, smiling a little sheepishly over my shoulder. You mean how long were you gazing out the window like a total idiot while thinking about a girl who barely knows you exist? Shut it. She knows. Or she knew, I thought. But yes, I asked. How long? About a minute, he said. So what happened? Unrequited love, I told him. What do you think happened? Nothing.
Chapter 5. I filled my lungs with air before pushing off the edge of the pool. The cool water covered my hands first, then my head and the rest of me. I stayed underwater, dolphin kicking my legs, with my arms still extended, for as long as I could. When my head finally broke the surface, I gulped in air. It felt good, familiar. Panic, measured breathing, relief. It had been too long since I'd had the opportunity for a swim. I needed to make more of an effort to find time. I started with an easy breaststroke, a warm-up. My head moved slightly up and down with my nose staying above water. I had always been able to think here. No, that's not true. Not always. There was a time when I was too terrified. It was all I could do to not run out of the water screaming and crying in my early years. Then, after I had learned to swim, but hadn't fully conquered my fear of the water, I'd leave it, shaken from head to foot, near paralyzed from fear. Fear of death, fear of disappointing my brothers. My brother. There was only one still living, Llewellyn. I wish I knew where he was. We were told to split up. I never understood why. It wasn't long after our oldest brother died that I started down a dangerous path. Llewellyn saved me. Then we were told it wasn't safe for us to be together anymore. The old gods would be looking for us now. We had to separate and flee. I changed my stroke to front crawl, slowly working up to full speed. I thought about what I would do if given the same choice again. I would do things differently. We were vulnerable then, and we didn't ask questions. We said our goodbyes and left. My hands cut through the water, faster and faster. As usual, it was early enough that I had lain to myself. My greatest fear, even greater than my fear of water, was that I would be like my grandfather, power-drunk and evil. The Demon King, cutting down anything and everything to reach his goals. I was set on that path of darkness, and had almost been taken by it. I thought it was inevitable I would turn into him. That alone was my destiny. But I had a new destiny now. A second chance. A chance to save lives, rather than take them. And I wouldn't waste it. 30 minutes later, I was standing in a shower, with the water as hot as I could take it. I might be immortal, but I still needed to stretch. I changed at the gym to be certain I was on time for work. After having Jenner over for pizza last week, I made sure I was always on time or early. If I needed to ask for another cover because of a dream, I wanted it to be the only one. I waved goodbye to Ella at the front desk, walking quickly so she wouldn't try to start a conversation. The bus that would take me to work was about a 10-minute walk away, time enough to lose myself in thought. These dreams were a chance for me to do something good in the world. I forced myself to believe that. I forced myself to not think of the potential risks. I was not so important. Saving these people, that's what I needed to focus on. It was a message from the gods, the ones who hadn't tried to kill me. They were telling me I was not just the grandson of a demon king, but that I was meant for so much more. It had to be. I hadn't dreamed of anyone in danger since the man in the coffee shop, but I'd seen a hit and run on the news yesterday. If I'd only known, I could have helped. No, I thought. I need to be thankful for the lives I do get to save, and not ask for more. I know what happens when people get more power than they're ready for. What would happen if I started getting those dreams every night, and every day I had to find a new person to help? I could quit my job. I just did it to stay busy. It's not like I needed the money. With some handy manoeuvring, I'd been able to pass my wealth down to myself through the years, and my investment portfolio was healthy, to say the very least. Thoughts of what the future held chased each other around my mind all the way to the bus stop. There was only one other person waiting. It was a tired guy from a few weeks ago, the day they'd found that girl I'd been too stupid to save. This morning, tired guy was leaning up against a pole marking the area as a bus stop. And yes, he appeared to be fast asleep. He was so deeply asleep that, when the bus arrived, he didn't move. I asked the driver to wait a moment so I could wake him up. "Thanks," he said, before hurrying onto the bus with an apologetic look at the driver. "That was nice of you," the bus driver said in a smooth baritone that didn't match his thin frame. "Thanks for waiting," I said. "My good Samaritan act for the day," he told me with a chuckle.
Me too, right? I asked, before returning to find a seat. I was half a bus length away from Tired Guy, but even so, after he yawned and went back to sleep, I yawned, and a wave of tiredness came over me. Yawns are contagious, I thought. This is his fault. I let my head fall forward, and my eyes close. "Fisher here," said a burly man. He pressed his palm to a scanning pad before his eyes flicked to the clock beside him. "Montgomery Fisher, and we're all clear." The man was in a small room lit up by panels and dials. There was a large window to his left showing a nearly empty platform. A small girl in the arms of her mother waved at someone on board. A few cars down from Fisher, most of the passengers were silent, though some chatted quietly. The train started to move and pick up speed as it left the station. A woman with a baby in her arms stood to get something from the overhead compartment. There was a jolt, and she almost lost her footing. A man in the seat across from her caught her. "Thank you," she said as her baby started to cry. "That was close," the man said. Another jolt, another cry, a screech of metal on metal, a horn bellowing one low note, 1,000 more voices crying out in vain. "Gods!" I jerked awake. My hand automatically found the necklace I always wore under my shirt. I had actually fallen asleep on the bus. I'd never done that before. I looked around to see if Tired Guy was still here. I could blame him, right? "Dunno," I swore as I looked outside. I missed my stop, luckily not by much. The bus pulled over and I got off, backtracking its route and thinking of what I saw while I slept. "Bway?" Jenner said as I walked into the kitchenette. I looked at him quizzically. I was certain bway meant ox, but the way he said it made it sound like he meant friend. "You look terrible," he continued. "Coffee? I can make another pot if you want it to be disgustingly strong. This is the stuff for mere mortals." "What did you—" I looked up at him sharply. "What?" "New pot it is," he spoke in a sing-song voice. "Someone's cranky." "I'm sorry, Jenner," I said, realizing he'd been making a joke. "My mind is off on another planet." "That's all right, man. It just means I'll be kicking her butt today on close calls under 5. He smiled broadly. "Not likely. Actually, yes, you will. Can you cover for me?" I asked. "I have to leave a little early today. I knew I would make it with enough time if I stayed till the end of the day, but I didn't want the fate of everyone on that train to depend on the timeliness of my bus." "Are you kidding me, boy?" Jenner said, looking around and taking a step closer. Aye, I thought. That time he might have called me an ox. "Bossman has already been snooping. She noticed you were late last time." "All right," I said. I would make it work. Our boss, Yvette Mutombo, was a no-nonsense organizational master who kept this place running like a well-oiled machine. I was lucky she had decided to overlook my late days. She saw everything. But usually, if the work got done, she didn't look too closely. By the end of the day, Jenner had closed his record high of 35 calls. He was still too shy of my 37. It had been busy. So busy, I barely had time to think about the dream. But as soon as the clock read 4 p.m., I rushed off to Union Station. I felt panic rise in me as I stepped off the bus at North Capitol in Massachusetts. What do I do? What do I do? I said under my breath, over and over again. Slow down, I told myself. First, I have to slow down. Though my mind was slowing, I still walked into Union Station at a brisk pace. I thought through the problem. What do I know? I know mag trains run on their own. The trains have a conductor, but only for emergencies. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to remember exactly how it had happened in my dream, trying to remember exactly how the train had crashed. The conductor messed up, and then there was a warning signal. Or was there a warning signal before the conductor messed up? If the trains drive themselves, then it would be the signal first, right? I broke into a run down the station stairs. I let out a hurried stream of excuse-me's and sorries as I pushed my way through the crowd of people headed to and from the many platforms. I hadn't taken a train here in a while, and I didn't know my way around the station very well. I paused before rounding a corner. Did I see the number of the train that crashed? No, I only saw the conductor. I tried to hack the station computer to find a schedule. Ugh, I grunted in frustration when I was firewalled. How does a train station have more security than the Senate? Thinking fast, I pushed a button on the side of my watch. Call Jenner, I said. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I heard the loud beeping and the unisex automated voice telling passengers to board the trains. 3 different trains were leaving in the next few minutes, and I didn't know which one to stop. If it came down to it, I might have to stop all of them. Locker! I heard Jenner say. You left in such a rush, I didn't have time to tell you I kicked your—
Jenner, I said frantically.
Where are you, man? I can barely hear you.
Hang on, I said. My hands shook slightly as I went to push a second button on the side of my watch. 2 small transparent discs popped out of the side. I placed one behind my ear and the other on the curve of my throat, just above where someone would feel for a pulse, if anyone felt for a pulse anymore. Taking a scan was faster and more accurate. Jane, I need your help, I said, once the headset was in place. When Jenner responded, it sounded like he was standing right beside me.
You're going to be late for work again tomorrow? You better tell—
No, I cut him off. I need you to get into the Union Station system and tell me the number of the train being conducted by Montgomery Fisher.
What?
He asked. Jenner, this is time sensitive, I yelled. It was loud around me. The strange looks that came my way were few. What train is Montgomery Fisher driving today?
Those trains drive themselves, you know,
he said in a taunting voice.
And if you want me to commit a felony and risk jail time, then you are going to have to tell me why.
Jenner, this is not the time. Even if I wanted to explain it to him, which I didn't, I couldn't now. My frustration mixed with a dangerous anger and was too anxious to suppress. A crackle of excess power surged between my fingers. As the final boarding call for one of the trains was being broadcast throughout the station, I clenched my fists, trying to hold in the magic.
What are you doing at Union?
He asked. Jenner, I yelled again, as my fury at the situation and his lack of cooperation broke through and took over. It made my next words sharp and my accent thick. I swear to the gods below, if you do not tell me what train Fisher is on, I will curse you within an inch of your life. Power crackled over my skin, and the connection glitched for a moment.
Oh, curse me, would you?
His accent equally increased. Fine, you don't want to help me? Fine. I would have to disable all 3 trains, but how to do that without drawing attention to myself? And not just from the humans here. Magic attracts magic, especially the kind of cast it would take to pull off stopping 3 trains at once. I had to get a move on. Thanks for nothing, I said, and started to hang up.
Train 42 to Toronto, Jenner said. You're a real piece of work, you know that?
And he hung up. I looked down at the square on my wrist that had displayed the face of one of the only friends I had left in the world. The watch set and reappeared. I'll make it up to him later, I thought. The train pulling out of the station was not the 42 to Toronto. A wave of relief washed over me. I had a little time. I looked up at the nearest display board to see which trains were leaving from where and when. Walking over to an open space of wall, I double-tapped the glass panel, and the image of a microphone appeared. Direct to train 42, I said in a loud voice. The number 42 popped up with a small map beneath. I looked at the directions it gave me. They weaved through the massive station and over to platform 17, where train 42 would be departing in 8 minutes. It would take me at least half that time to get there. Clutching my messenger bag to my side, I ran through the crowd. After doubling back more than once, 5 minutes later, I was on a flight of stairs that would take me to an overpass and then down to platform 17. If the problem was not the conductor, would I have to stop the train entirely? The gleaming silver tube hovered inches off the magnetic track. The final boarding call went out as I finished my descent onto the platform. The doors were about to close. I still had no idea what I should do. I was running out of time. Magic crackled in my fist. I tried to think of a solution. A bell chimed. The doors started to close. I rushed onto the train. There was an announcement from the driver. I recognized Fisher's voice. My panic rose. I shoved my hands in my pockets to hide the blue sparks flashing between my fingers. Most of the passengers were silent. Some chatted quietly as the train started to move and pick up speed as it left the station. I saw a woman with a baby in her arms retrieve something from the overhead compartment. I recognized her. She seemed to stand in slow motion. Horror filled me as I realized I could do nothing to stop this, that I would have to watch all these people die. There was a jolt. The woman almost lost her footing. A man in the seat across from her caught her. No, I thought, as the woman's baby started to cry. That was close, the man said. No, I said aloud. I would not allow this. I could not. I couldn't watch all these people die. I pulled my hands out of my pockets and called magic to me. I stood with my eyes closed and fists clenched at my side as there was another jolt that rocked the train. The baby kept crying. There was a collective intake of breath, and I exhaled a single word. Vani, I said, as I threw the power that had been gathering in my core. My open hands sent sparks of blue magic from my fingertips through the floor of the train. There was a screech of metal on metal, a horn bellowing one low note. And time stopped. I collapsed where I stood. I felt the power of the spell draining me. Every second that passed, every moment that I held time in place, time took something from me, just like magic did.
Flat on the ground, I lay my hand on the dirty linoleum floor. I inhaled and sent a silent prayer to the old gods before whispering, "Tohum." Time regained its normal pace. 1,000 voices cried out, and everything went black. "Slap him! Don't slap him! I saw it in a movie once, it worked! Don't slap him! Call 911! I'm gonna slap him." "Please don't slap me," I said quietly. "Thank God you're awake," said a woman. My eyes flicked open. I was still on the train floor. Emergency lighting lit both the passengers slowly exiting the train and the figures huddled around me. "Oh, man," said a teenage boy. "I really wanted to slap you." "Hush," said the woman. I think she was his mother. Then, to me, she said, "Are you all right?" "What happened?" I asked, sitting up. "Dude, you fainted," the boy laughed. "The train malfunctioned, started moving, then stopped real sudden for no reason, and you totally passed out." "Oh," I said. "It worked. Thank Danu and the gods it worked." "Can I call someone for you?" the woman asked. "Thank you, no," I said, getting to my feet. Concern filled her eyes. "Maybe we shouldn't leave you alone," she suggested. "Really?" I said, as I swayed on the spot. "I'm okay." "You don't look okay," said the teenager. "I could still slap you," he added with a hopeful look. "Thanks, but no," I said to the kid. "I'll be all right," I said to his mom. Then I pushed through the crowd, leaving the train behind me. Jenner had sent me a profile of Montgomery Fisher with a note reading, "You're an asshole." Pushing the thought of Jenner's hurt feelings aside, I tried to process what happened. A male voice announced that trains would be delayed or cancelled for the rest of the day. Ignoring the many groans and complaints of the station patrons, I silently thanked the gods. I hadn't used that much power in centuries, millennia even. It should have killed me. It would have, I thought as I nearly fell, stumbling up the stairs. If I could die that way, I would have. I clutched the railing for support, my legs weak beneath me. I had to take a breather next to a young man chatting animatedly to someone about how his train was cancelled, and it was a sign he should quit his soul-sucking job. Another life saved, I thought, jokingly, before moving on. A few minutes later, I was making my way out of Union. The train was disabled, at least temporarily, and I hoped the magic I used wasn't enough to attract anything nasty. Except something felt different. Something was off, yet it was also familiar. Sure, I feel weak, but something is missing, I thought, as I exited the station. I'm missing something. What could it? "Lochlan?" said a familiar voice behind me. I froze, and my heart started to pound in my chest. "Lochlan, is that you?" The Eastern European accent was gone, but then again, my accent was gone too. Well, for the most part. All the same, I would have known her voice anywhere. I turned slowly on the spot. Full lips broke into a smile that reached all the way to her bright brown eyes. Long dark hair cascaded over her shoulders. It was longer than the last time I'd seen her, but that had been 5 years ago. "Zamila," I said.